what did contemporary traditional healers do? I'm going to tell you a story about Daniel, who's an interesting guy that I know. And Daniel earned the DSM label of bipolar. He was, as you can imagine, he was mostly down, which is the way it is. And Daniel had a problem that when he got up, he started channeling famous Indian resistors, like Big Bear. Or Big Bear is a famous Canadian Cree who fought treaty. He fought, taking treaty. And he's pretty famous now in Saskatchewan because they made a movie about him in two sets. The Temptations of Big Bear is the movie. And it's on my favorite television channel, which is Aboriginal People's Television Network, which I think they block at the border because you can get other Canadian channels when you cross the border, but you can't get that one. I guess they don't want the natives to get restless down here or something. But anyway, and when he would channel Big Bear, he would try and convince the Prime Minister to change his Indian policies. Well, if you're Indian and you're channeling Big Bear and you're trying to get to the Prime Minister, you're going to end up in jail. If you're white, you'll end up in the mental hospital. But if you're Indian, you're going to end up in jail. And so that was one of his big difficulties, is that he kept ending up in jail. The only time he felt good, it caused him to go to jail. And Daniel had been tried on just about every medication that you can imagine. There's two that don't exist in Canada, so he didn't get Geodone or Abilify, because they're not in Canada. But nothing really worked. This is a common story. I'm always amused by the psychiatric literature on drugs, because they select the patients for those studies so carefully that they don't fit anyone in my practice. I don't know about your practice, but my favorite paper is the study on Seroquel for monotherapy for bipolar depression. And to get into that study, let me tell you how many academic centers it took to enroll 290 patients. It took 43 academic centers to find 290 patients, because you were excluded if you'd ever thought of suicide. How about that? I don't know anyone that's never thought of suicide. You're excluded if you ever had a substance use problem, or you're using any other substances, including benzodiazepines. I guess you could be taking a little bit of Ativan for the first 3 weeks. You're excluded if you have any other diagnoses. So I could wave my eagle wing at that person, at those people, and they would get well. I want to see them do a study of alcohol abusing, marijuana smoking, suicidal, homicidal, bipolar people. That's the population I want to see them study, because that's what I got in my office. I don't know about your office, but that's who I see. But I'll guarantee you that study will never get done, because it could only hurt them, the drug companies, that is. So anyway, that's Daniel. He was one of those guys, the guys that don't fit the randomized controlled trial entry criteria and never seem to be helped. And so I saw Daniel when I was on psychiatry call, and we actually had, we connected, because I understood the worldview he was coming from, and to his, I knew Big Bear, and so I said to him, I said, well, what would Big Bear tell you to do? And he said, Big Bear would say, get to a ceremony. And I said, well, why don't you? He said, I don't know where one is. I said, where's your reserve? He told me, and I said, I know there's a Sundance happening on the reserve next to yours this weekend. You better go. So you better go and get doctored. And I said, I'm going. I'll introduce you to some of those, to the chief, the Sundance chief. And he said, well, I got nothing better to do. I was going to kill myself this weekend. So he said, so I guess I'll go to a Sundance instead. So he did. And, he didn't dance. He wasn't in any shape to dance. But he sat there, and it's a 4-day ceremony. I think it was the second day, he went in and got doctored, and they worked on him for like an hour. And so he decided that it was time for him to move out of the urban jungle and back to his reserve, so he could continue to get doctored by these healers on this other reserve next door, because now he'd established a relationship with them. And he could start going to ceremony, because they sweat once a week, at least. Generally, you can find a sweat any day of the week if you know enough people. But so they sweat once a week, and they have other ceremonials, the shaking tent, and sometimes Iwipi, which is a ceremony in which they tie up the medicine man or woman, and the spirits untie them, and then they doctor the people. So he said, I'm just going to immerse myself. I'm going to immerse myself in this ceremonial way, in this life of the people in this way, because since my other life was going to kill me, I got nothing to lose. If it turns out to be as bad as what I was doing before, I can always kill myself. That's what I was going to do. And so he did. And so I saw him, I heard from him a couple of times by email, and I saw him the next year at Sundance, and he was amazingly better. This year he was dancing. He'd stopped drinking, he was off all his meds, he was doing well. And what happens when you're embedded in a community, in a situation like that, is when you start to go off, people sit on you. People tie you down and sit on you. And they have ways to make you go to sleep. And even if it's tying you to a tree, And what I've seen, I could tell you 100 of these stories. And what I've seen is that people, I believe, people need other people for affect regulation. People, like monkeys, are not designed to be alone. When we're alone, we go nuts, like baboons and apes. And the only way that we can, regulate how we feel is if other people are doing it with us. And so, this is an Aboriginal model, because we would think, you would be aghast in Aboriginal country to think of someone living alone without their relatives. And nobody would do it. Except if you're on drugs or crazy, right? And that's when you need your relatives the most. So the healer, if all Daniel had to give him was a cigarette, that'd be enough. If Daniel had other gifts he could offer, well, that would be good. And it's also a problem, because the healers have too much work and not enough time to do it, because the people don't have enough resources to give them. One of the healers that I know locally where I live, he tells, if somebody asks him what kind of a gift he needs, he said, rent money. I got enough blankets. He said, it's rent money that I need. So contemporary traditional healers are everywhere. I know one in Taos. I know one in Tesuque Pueblo. They're all around doing their work. And even in big urban places, there's traditional healers. When I was in Boston some time ago, I was lucky enough to give a little talk at Harvard. And when I was going back to the airport, I was in one of those super shuttles, and the driver was playing some music, and I said to him, yeah, it sounds like ceremonial music. It sounds like what we would play back home, for a ceremony. He said, that voodoo ceremony, man. And then, everyone else in the van tried to get a little further away from the driver. But I got up close, and I said, wow, do you practice? Are you a voodoo person? He said, yes, man. He said, when I'm not driving cab, I heal the people. He said, nobody helped them here at Harvard. He said, I pick them up and take them home and make them well. So he was sort of doing outreach, I guess. But he turned out to be one of the main healers for the Haitian community in Boston. And he spent 4 months of the year in Haiti, studying with his elder. And when we were almost to the airport, I said, hey, I said, is it really true that the spirits take that goat head? He said, yeah, man, that goat head, it disappear. You know, spirits take it. Because they use goat heads in some of their ceremonies. I don't know why. We use puppies in some of ours, but that's a whole other story. But by then, everybody was really wanting to get out of the van, as you can imagine. You see, indigenous spirituality makes Eurocentric folk uncomfortable sometimes. Yeah. Especially those that come from Harvard. Anybody here from Harvard? One person. How about that? All right.